This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, a show where we discuss any and all aspects of pop culture. We are your hosts, Tyler.
And Chris.
And today, our special guest host,
Becca.
And we are kicking off spooky season. And what better way than, I guess, to talk about what is the appeal, specifically to us, but, to everyone in general. Like, what draws us to horror when it turns other people away?
Because we're weird.
True, but why are we weird? I don't know the answer to that.
For me, I grew up less into horror than I was just the macabre aspect of Halloween, which is always weird. People assume I love horror and am a super fan, and I just like the culture and atmosphere. Not to say that I don't love, it's like Tim Burton movies and things like that, especially like the first quarter of his career. That was a big part for me, is like weird, dark aesthetic. Generally vampires, generally, like the 1930s Dracula, Frankenstein movies, things like that. Edgar Allan Poe is a big thing for me. Shout out to every 1980s English teacher that decided they were going to indoctrinate all of their students during the month of October. Because I was one of and any and all of them. I think Mask of the Red Death is a big... I
remember reading that one.
Telltale Heart?
Mm-hmm. In middle school, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say for me, as far back as I can remember, I had an interest in the unknown and ghost stories, unsolved mysteries. I grew up watching unsolved mysteries, groovy movies, like the USA groovy movies is kind of where I started with horror. Thriller was when I really kicked it into hyperdrive. Is like, I already liked kind of spooky stuff, like scary stories and whatever, but then I became obsessed with Thriller, and I watched the making of Michael Jackson's Thriller like
that being
over and over and over again, and that just kicked it into hyperdrive. I always say that's what kind of launched me into the love of all things kind of spooky, horror related, all of that, and then it just grew and continued to evolve from there.
You're a huge horror fan. Do you remember like the first big horror movie that you went to go see? Was it a Freddy movie?
I didn't go to a lot of horror movies in the theater when I was younger. I would watch them at home from the video rental places. So I would always rent all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and things like that. But the first movie I remember really scaring me as a kid was Children of the Corn. That was one of the ones that gave me nightmares. But yeah, I didn't probably start really going to the theater to see the movies until the later installments of like Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff. Maybe like Dream Child and on up from there maybe. But I would watch them on VHS, like all the Freddy movies, all the Jason movies, a lot of everything from that like 80s era, I guess. I would watch them on VHS and stuff. And I don't really remember what was the first horror movie that I saw in a theater. That's interesting. But I know I started going to the Nightmare on Elm Street ones probably around like the Dream Child. And I remember going to see Freddy's Dead with like the 3D glasses and stuff. I remember seeing that one in the old campus cinema here in town that isn't around anymore.
Building's still there.
It's the Copper Fox now. It's an event center.
Is it really?
Yeah, people hold parties.
That's
and
where the Copper Fox. I keep
yeah.
hearing about it. I didn't know. It's like behind a big establishment that I never have a reason to go back behind there for. And New Nightmare is still the best Freddy movie. Anyway.
For me, when I think about it, it's kind of like a perfect firestorm of things. Because there's a lot of horror focused towards kids when I was little. Because you had Goosebumps and...
Yeah, Nickelodeon and Disney put a lot of effort into it.
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah.
And like Disney had like their made-for-TV movies, and then
Mr. Boogedy.
Yeah, and then even more, you had like Courage the Cowardly Dog, and
that was on all the time.
Yeah, it's like,
and everybody started doing Halloween specials.
Yeah.
In the late 80s, early 90s. Before that, there was an occasional thing.
They don't do that much anymore.
Yeah,
and I don't know why.
Every sitcom took a break, and like depending on even like Frasier, like they did a Halloween episode. They just like Halloween and Christmas. Everybody expects shows to do a Christmas episode, or at least like have decorations up so it's the month of December's episode or whatever. But like Boy Meets World had like what could arguably be called an out of continuity episode,
and one of the best episodes.
Yes, like people die in that episode, don't they? So, and like I remember, I didn't realize how old this was. When you think about how old some of the cartoons were, like Looney Tunes and Disney, and there's a certain like wall where they look old, like they look like they belong belong to antiquity, and like Bugs Bunny doesn't look like Bugs Bunny, and Mickey Mouse doesn't look like Mickey Mouse. But then there's still like they leap forward in quality and how they standardize their looks, and those are even still from the in 30s and 40s, and people don't realize how old they are. But that Halloween short of the
spooky skeletons,
not that, oh well, yeah, those two, there's like a few of those that they did that were like wild for the time. But I'm talking about Donald Duck.
Oh yeah, with his nephews.
Yeah, the nephews going trick-or-treating was, I think, the first, I don't, who the knows if I mentioned this a year ago, but it's like the first instance of trick-or-treating in any kind of culture, like pop culture venue or media, whereas it showed people going trick-or-treating, which is not like a new thing at the time, and there's traditions that you can be argued borrowed even from Christmas caroling and the like that became trick-or-treating, or the soul cakes or whatever. But yeah, Disney was on top of this a long time before a lot of other things were.
Yeah, and you touched upon the going trick-or-treating and stuff like that. And I think the reason that Halloween is my favorite holiday, other than just that I love spooky things, is because it's so fun to watch people that you see in their normal everyday life and be like, oh, this is the day that the world kind of comes together and says, let's take on other characters, let's become something else. And you get to see adults and kids and just everybody kind of dress up and put on these costumes, and it's like it's an alternate reality for a day. People dress up, you give out candy, you have fun, and to me it's just the most fun. It's just like the most
objectively funner than Christmas.
Well, for me it is.
Don't you like there's a caveat.
No, I think the caveat is the both of us have worked too long in retail.
That is a huge part of it. Look,
it has completely killed your Christmas spirit.
I'm not going to say that's not. I'm working on my 11th year in a place that has Christmas in it 9 to 10 months out of the year.
Yeah. It's at what point did we just say it and just leave the Christmas there?
I've said for a while now we should at least have an aisle that is there 12 months out of the year that's orderable, and that because certain things would sell, and never let it go on sale. But one thing that kills my Christmas, if you just step outside the bubble with me for a second, it's not my holiday anymore. Even if I get a day off and I get to do whatever the I don't get to do what the I want. You crazy? I have to go to somebody else's house and be there for a while, if not 1 or 2 of the days, and with a bunch of people I do not know, that don't know me, that I have nothing in common with, and I'm just there. I'm the weird autistic guy hanging out in the kitchen, and they're like, is he okay? Probably not. You want to check on him? No, I don't want to talk to that guy. And guess what? On Halloween, I blend in.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm not trapped in there with them. They're trapped in there with me.
Yeah, like Rorschach.
Yes.
Yeah, like. And that's a good point too, is like, because I'm having the experience now of my fiance has a daughter, Alex, and hi Alex if you listen, and she happens to be Team Halloween. Mm-hmm. She likes Christmas, she likes getting gifts and stuff, she's a kid, she liked that, but she's already been like, let's go to Spirit Halloween, and she'll come over and say, do I have like a black dress to put on? Can I do vampire makeup? Can we do witchy stuff? Like she's already all about Halloween, so I'm getting to experience some of that like childhood fun with it again too. And like last year we got to, I got to sit with her and carve pumpkins and stuff. So it's kind of bringing back that like, oh yeah, I remember being a kid and getting all excited in the run up to Halloween and stuff. And my parents never let me go trick or treating. They were very protective and everything. But for me, it was always like they would say, we'll do a Halloween party at home and you can give out candy to other people. So we would have something scary planned. We would have like Halloween music or whatever, and me and my brother and stuff would like dress up, and we would like hand out candy to like all of our neighbors and stuff, and just do decorations or scary stuff or whatever. And now I'm like kind of going back to that and being like, wow, when you're a kid, it's really magical. Mm-hmm. It's like you get to, it's almost like not quite like, oh, you're in the Harry Potter universe. It's not as much as that, but it is kind of like you go into like this little alternate reality for a while of like getting to embrace the dark side, the spooky stuff, stuff and having like all these little traditions that you can do, and it brings back the fun of it, you know.
I was gonna say, for me, it's also like chasing a high that you never had, because
As an adult, from when you were a kid.
well, like I know like these like horror movies and stuff, like people are like, oh yeah, that scared me. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be good, and then watch it and there's like,
Lame.
that scared you?
Like Jason just punched that guy's head off. That really, you can't
Yep,
really
Jason
do
Takes
that.
Manhattan.
And so it's just like, I don't know, because like I would always like, anytime my grandmother like babysat me, like I would have her tell me scary stories and stuff, and those always fascinated me. Then everyone else was like, no, I don't want to hear scary stories.
Yeah, you may be a sociopath, but we'll get back to that later. Did anybody watch The Twilight Zone? Because that was on year-round, and I think that was one, like, I don't remember when I saw my first Twilight Zone episode or what it was, and some of them are lame. So there's a Christmas one, maybe more than one.
Which is also kind of weird because Christmas is the only time you see Twilight Zone on.
Yeah, like...
And New Year's.
They
do
used
the
to,
New Year's
yeah, on
marathon, I
Sci-Fi
think.
Channel, they used to do a marathon on 4th of July, which I'd forgotten about until I was watching something recently about Twilight Zone, and the guy mentioned that it was on 4th of July, and I remembered that they did used to do that. New Year's was a big one, and Christmas, and yeah, some of those, like, twists at the end of the episode really me up. And also Rod Serling being a champion of quality and an enemy of racism and bigotry, it really bleeds through in a lot of his stories that may have actually had a subconscious effect on me from a really young age. But, and again, sorry, I did not go back and listen to our Halloween episode from last year, so I don't remember if I mentioned this, but where we were talking about this specific thing. We're in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, for anybody who's listening that doesn't know us. Welcome in! Please don't click away. But if you do, just like and subscribe, and you can go do what you want. In I grew up in Texas mostly, and every year there would be, I don't know, I've been looking for these because it was kind of like Unsolved Mysteries, but it was just ghosts. It would just be Texas ghost stories. And every year around Halloween, I didn't know when it was going to be, but it would be pretty easy to find. It would be on a local channel, and they would be like dramatized versions with interviews from the people, like an Unsolved Mysteries, how they would do, you know, like reenactments, but like really have the actors like actually do it with maybe a little bit of voiceover and a little bit of real acting, and talk about the exact place where these specific things happened. Maybe it was fiction, I don't know, but they presented it as if it were real because, you know, I don't know. You know, and like Texas, we have through here and through portions of the South, there's a lot of Civil War history. There's a lot of ghost stories and things through a lot of plantations that are said to be extremely haunted. Texas doesn't have that so much as it has other wars that were fought in it, and some native culture, Spanish culture.
Yeah,
Mexican
I would imagine
culture.
that because of the
And the Day of the Dead.
Tex-Mex
Yeah.
influence, that Mexico has, they really know how
Yeah.
to do.
And
you know,
see,
Halloween is nothing compared to Dia de los Muertos.
And I didn't know that as a kid. It wasn't really taught, and I didn't really know as much about like actual Mexican culture and how they celebrate this season. So I am sure that had an influence on why it's so prevalent, because it seems weird. When you think of Texas, you don't think of Halloween specifically, you know. It doesn't get as cold, it doesn't feel as autumn as especially as it does here further north, and it definitely, I mean, you're more likely to see somebody riding a horse, even though Kentucky is the horse capital of the world. You're more likely to see somebody riding a horse or see like cattle there. There's more rodeos, things of that nature. Ann Richards was the governor at the time. Anyway.
Well, I think here in Kentucky, when I was growing up at least, there was a lot of, you know, the schools put a lot of effort into spooky season. I have to say that's where a lot of my love came from. I remember my music teacher, Miss Isaacs, would play this thing called the Banshee that's like played on piano string. It's a famous piece of classical music, and she would play that for us and introduce us to that. And we would do all the songs about there wasn't a woman all skin and bones. And we had specific like little Halloween songs we would learn in music class. And then sometimes in regular classrooms, we would do spooky, you know, we would read ghost stories or like urban legend type stories, or it'd be like our creative writing assignment would be something spooky spooky or whatever, like make up your own little horror story. And I remember writing one in 5th grade about Craftmatic chairs that would set the elderly people up.
Yeah.
And I wrote a short story about Craftmatic chairs that ate people when I was in 5th grade. So that goes back to it. But I know that here in Kentucky, we have some of the major paranormal spots and a lot of legends and stuff. I have a book called Weird Kentucky.
Yeah.
That gets into some of the cryptids that are supposed to be around here, all the haunted places. We have some that when they do like most haunted places in America, we have a couple places here in Kentucky that usually make the list. Bob Mackey's World.
Yeah.
Of course, Waverly Hills.
Yeah, Waverly Hills is a huge one that everybody
and
knows.
I know that WDKY, I don't know if they still do it, but a couple years ago, around this time of year, they would do something called the Spirit of the Bluegrass. Mm-hmm. And they would go to places like Whitehall.
Oh, yeah, Whitehall's right here in Madison County.
Yeah, they would go to places like Whitehall or like some distillery along the Bourbon Trail that's supposed to be haunted by old moonshiners or something. So
And Grant from Ghost Hunters used to live somewhere around here. Like,
yeah, he came into Cracker Barrel when I worked.
Yeah, he it was one of my first couple of years. He came into the establishment where I work at, and we would regularly see him at the sushi place, like that was a few doors down. So that was pretty cool. Some people were like, "Who?" And I'm like, "From Ghost." It was on. Never mind. If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, and probably for what I guess the past 16 years or so, we've had Scarefest here in Kentucky.
Did you say 15?
15 or 16,
Yeah.
something like that.
It was, I think, 2008
We've
or
had
9.
Scarefest, which is a big horror / paranormal convention where they have a lot of vendors, they have paranormal guests, people from Ghost Hunters or whatever, and then they have a lot of horror actors and directors and whatnot that come, and that's been a big part of the culture around here around this time of year.
Yeah, it's weird when like there's a horror convention but it's nowhere near. If it is like in the spring or the summer somewhere, I guess it's like bonus spooky thing you get.
Yeah,
if
because
that's
I pretty
you.
much celebrate Halloween year round.
Yeah.
So any opportunity I can get to do anything in that wheelhouse, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, especially if it's nowhere near this time of year.
And I miss, which one was it? Halloween Express?
Yeah.
Yeah, Halloween Express used to have...
Well, Halloween Express was the one that was open year round.
yeah.
And he eventually closed it and was going to reopen it. And we'd talked to him and he had found a new location. He was going to reopen it and be back year round. And the shutdown, the 2020, killed that. Yeah, because it was when we had talked to him right before that. It was in late 2019. And so going into that, it never happened and we never heard from him again. So that sucks.
Well, apparently Spirit Halloween has like kind of thrown the idea out there to have Spirit Halloweens that are open year round, but we're not quite there yet, but we may be going in that direction. I think Halloween has continued to become more popular, and I think it's, it's not up there with Christmas yet as far as the numbers go, commercialism and all that, but I think it is second.
But that's the thing, is it depends on where and who you are. Like, everybody is legally required to celebrate Christmas here in America, and if you don't, well, bad things happen to you. You're not legally required to celebrate Halloween, like if you hate joy, but for those who do, and you don't even have
you're like that woman that worked in the mall and would hand out the little pamphlets to everybody saying, don't celebrate Halloween, it's the devil's birthday, you're celebrating the devil's birthday.
I had friends growing up, their mom would hand out candy canes for Halloween.
What the f***?
Yeah.
That's worse than a toothbrush. Or there's the one woman who works at the library and she wears like Jack Skellington stuff like year round.
You'll love to see it.
So, but it's like, how do we measure that in commercialism? Because obviously, like, Christmas is that everybody has to decorate holiday and you have to buy stuff for it. Cards, gifts, what have you. And they've tried to even make fake new traditions, like an ugly sweater thing, where the object of this game that you're playing is to trick Ryan Reynolds into being a idiot and looking like a dumbass. Shout out to Hugh Jackman, you win that. Ryan Reynolds gets to make everybody else look dumb all the time. He's like, Channing Tatum, you want to be in my movie? And Channing Tatum's like, yeah, I do. I get to be Gambit finally. And he's like, yeah, but I'm going to make fun of you the whole time, make you look like a dumbass. So at least Hugh Jackman got one back for us on that one. Ryan Reynolds, you're the dumbass. Anyway, that was so that you can sell 1 million sweaters that somebody's gonna wear for part of an evening. You're not gonna, or a work shift. Oh, wear your ugly sweaters. Blah, blah, blah. No, infuriates me. What is this, like that Swedish thing where people put soot on their face? Like, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Halloween is just like however you want to do it is fine. If you want to put glasses on and like unbutton your shirt and have a blue t-shirt underneath and be like, I'm Clark Kent, get it? Like, cool. You put in a little bit of effort and thought into it. And that's all it's about, is having fun, not being forced to do things you don't want to do. It's not going to conjure anything except a good time.
Well, you can be if you're like us, and sometimes you can self-identify as the Halloween person even at Christmas time, because when I was going to a certain community school, a technical school here in Richmond, and they had one of those ugly Christmas required days.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, don't wear your school uniform on this day. We're celebrating Christmas, and you know, you have to wear an ugly Christmas sweater or something. And so I went out to Walmart and bought a Christmas sweater that had like plaid colors on it and like gold or something, but it had a skull. It had a skull wearing a Santa hat, and it said Team Naughty. And so I'm like, I'm the person that is gonna wear a skull sweater for the Christmas party.
Yeah, keep it going.
Yeah.
It's, winter Halloween.
Which goes to, I know that Tyler had mentioned that you guys did the ghost stories for Christmas last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I think back in the old days,
which you would have listened to because you listened to the podcast, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good answer.
Yes. But we have to remember that Halloween, as we know it, has evolved from back in the old pagan days with Samhain and the winter holidays, death theme back then.
Yeah.
There was not Christmas, you know, so the that dark season, the winter time was so cold and so dreary, and death was such a part of the culture back then. And I think that's why it kind of leans to that in those winter months. It's the time of darkness. It's the time when you're waiting for stuff to be reborn.
Because Persephone has to go live in the underworld for 6 months.
Yeah. She goes back to Hades in the underworld, and she comes out as the spring maiden. But yeah, it's that dark time of the year. The atmosphere lends itself to scary, and people used to be isolated. They used to have to hibernate, and people didn't go out and go to work in the wintertime. They had to like take shelter, and they were housed up. And I guess a lot of people entertain themselves with folklore and ghost stories and stuff. And I think that carried through into our traditions now. And you don't see it as much at Christmas time, but you still do a little bit. I think Halloween kind of has that lingering effect. And you do still, because you get things like A Christmas Carol, where he's visited by ghosts, you know, and some people do still tell ghost stories and stuff when they're all together. You get the family together for a couple days. You know, sometimes people will still tell the ghost stories, and it's perfect, you know, for that kind of atmosphere and the darkness and the cold.
It seems to go toward that. Like, if there's whenever you get a bunch of people together that haven't seen each other in a year, sometimes even there's somebody who didn't make it last year, and might have a few people that haven't seen each other for a couple of years, and then they're like, hey, tell that one story where the weird thing happened, and you're like, okay, and then you go into it because you're all together for the first time in a long time. What else are you going to talk about? Like the fact that it's Christmas right now? No, families talk about it like if you're not arguing, you're just talking about random bullshit.
It's like, or you're indulging in other spirits for Christmas.
Yeah.
Or you have those crossover things like The Nightmare Before Christmas, you know, because I always say, people are like, well, do you watch The Nightmare Before Christmas as a Halloween movie or as a Christmas movie? And I'm like, I like to watch it in the middle.
You gotta start it.
I like to watch it in November.
Yeah. Dead center. You chart
kind of
it out.
In the center. And it's like, oh, we're
in between.
We're revisiting Halloween, and we're gearing up for Christmas.
It's like 2:36 on November 17th. I don't know that's what it is, but anyway. But yeah, that's when you should hit play.
I was going to go back to a point that one of you made earlier. I can't remember. And it was like...
We're not...
Oh, Tyler.
Like,
yeah, it was...
the same person.
I know. I think it was Tyler that was talking about, and we got onto the subject of how stuff was geared towards kids, like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark and things like that. And it triggered a memory for me that, yeah, in a way it's weird because people try to not acknowledge that stuff and like, oh, you can't watch horror movies until you're a certain age and this and that. But at the same time, as a kid, I remember a lot of stuff being marketed toward kids that was spooky or haunted or what, and they were talking Freddy Krueger dolls.
Yeah.
And there was a Freddy Krueger hotline, and it was like, get your parents' permission, but you can call and talk to Freddy.
Because who's that for? Adults?
And,
no.
Yeah,
it's
no,
for little
no kids. No, kids were like, oh, can I call Freddy?
Yeah.
You know, and I may have talked about this last time too, but another thing that sort of cemented it for me, I grew up in Berea, and Berea used to have, it started out as like a laundromat, and then they expanded and added like a video store, Snow White Laundry. And then it became Snow White Movie Rental. And then they just separated. They got a different building, and it was just Snow White Movie Rental. And all year round, they kept one back area that was just horror. It was all horror. And I could go there year round and rent horror movies. But at Halloween time, they would decorate that back area. And I remember going there as a kid once, and they had a coffin. You know, they had a coffin set up back there, and they had a little mannequin figure all dressed up in the coffin, and they had, you know, little lit candles around it and stuff. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And kids would go running straight to that back room, you know, when they would decorate for Halloween. Kids would run, they weren't going and picking out the animated, you know, movies or like the family friendly movies. They were running back to that to look at the
legit horror
stuff.
Movies.
Yeah. And my schools also, I forgot to mention, they would do the fall festival, you know, at this time of year. And there was always haunted house.
Yeah.
I was hoping we'd get to that.
Yeah, there was always like a haunted house.
So being part of the Beta Club, we always ran the haunted houses for those fall festivals.
I don't remember having anything like that associated with my actual school. I do remember when I was in my elementary school in Texas, we did have sort of a bit of a parade. Certain teachers would take the kids who were dressed up, and we'd walk around into other classrooms. We'd basically just disrupt the other classrooms and walk around in there. And the older kids would be like, "Fuck is this?" Whatever, and then get back to their whatever they were doing. But like haunted houses in general really took a leap forward in the past 20 years. I feel like before then it was come to, you know, like close your eyes and put your fingers in these peeled grapes. Those are eyeballs. And not to make fun of that. For little kids, that might actually be a cool thing. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, you have to think about it from a kid's perspective from the 80s and 90s, though. Don't think about it like now, where they're like, I can't stop looking at so you want me to dip my iPhone in it? No. Just put it in your pocket. And so you want me to put it down? Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, it's a different world we live in, literally. Like, we jumped timelines at some point, and we're not in the good Umbrella Academy one anymore. So, like, I think it was maybe, like, I want to say around 2008 to 2010 or 11, here, at least. I know some other places really went all in. There's some places where it's like, you get a reward if you make it to the end of it. These are glorified torture chambers.
Yeah.
Specifically, what's his name? The guy from Tennessee, or he moved to Tennessee.
I think that one might have finally got closed down.
He got arrested a couple weeks ago, McCamey Manor.
Yeah.
Because he was basically just taking people, chaining them up to his truck, and like dragging them through grass and gravel, telling them, I'm only going a half mile an hour. And it's like, you were not going a half mile. Like, this guy got up, skint all over like his body. So I'm not talking about or like if they drop spiders on you, or what the ever. Like, this is like, I assume this is what you did in your beta club, like, or at least these were the shot down ideas that you came in with. And but like, there's actually in this apartment complex, like further down, the guy who runs the Scaregrounds, Wicked World in Lexington lives here. The Driz. Chris, if you're listening, I know you're not, but hey, what's up? It's Dr. Drizzle. I don't remember what his character's name is, but when he's there, he's the bloody doctor. He's got a handlebar mustache, and he stays in character the entire time.
And that is the superior, I will say, not Not to suck up or anything. But that is the superior attraction, I think, in Lexington area. It's much better than the one at Jacobson Park. And all
it's
of that.
established.
It's
Like
the Wicked World Scaregrounds.
They own the
is
property.
legit.
Whoever owns the property owns that property, and it's there, and it sits there year round. And then they just come in and liven it up and do some stuff. And they've actually expanded. Now they have live music on the premises. There's a place, well, not year round, but say, like when it gets opened up, like, which should be pretty soon, actually. That's another thing I wanted to talk about. A lot of these places are getting property. Like there's a place just outside of Cincinnati, like a little north of Cincinnati, and I cannot remember the name, but it's like a little Halloween town. It's set up kind of like Tombstone Junction, like it's an old West town.
Yes.
And then, do you remember the name of it? Allison would if she were
Yeah,
here.
it is not coming to me right now, but yeah, you guys took me there like 2 years ago, I think it was, and it was great.
And,
it was a very great, interactive, immersive experience.
So there's people that walk around and they're like part of the thing. They're dressed like it's Old West or whatever, and they've got like gun blanks and they'll shoot randomly. You should know that. There's like a bar on like the side of the place that has all these shops and places to eat, mostly snacks and stuff, you know, like not like full meal. There's like a bar with like live music the whole time.
And they do karaoke.
Do they? Okay, I did not remember that.
Karaoke.
And there's a lot of vendors that come and set up around that time that have, you know, like very similar stuff to what you would see at a horror convention. And then you go in, when you come in and buy your ticket, you go in to walk around, and then you sign up or you put in your ticket for when they will call you for the trail. That's like the haunted trail. And this place does do a thing where if you do the anything goes, you get like some sort of colored bracelet, and then you can wear old clothes you don't give a about because you're gonna get blood splattered on you, mud, dirt,
locked in cages.
Yeah, like when you're actually on the trail, and you can take it off at any time, but like people should know you're in for it, and it's not cool. It's like a step up from some of the other things. They're not gonna put like spiders on you or whatever, but I think it goes a little too far at times, but that's what people have seemed to enjoy it.
Yeah, see, I'm that type of person, you know. Chris has been to a few of these things with me, and when they had the one of the old theaters here, I think it was actually the old campus cinema that one year, the fire department put on a haunted house, and they had a quote unquote electric chair that was rigged with like these little buzzers or something, and they needed a volunteer to go and sit in the electric chair and get buzzed, and I was the person that did it. And then at Wicked World Scaregrounds, they have a portion where you go into the voodoo shack, and the voodoo lady is gonna like put the spirit powder on somebody, and she always asks for a volunteer, and I'm always the person that volunteers because I'm chasing that high, you know. I'm like, try to scare me, you know, like try to scare me, because when we went to Jacobson Park and a guy jumped out, first time we went to Jacobson Park, guy comes out in a werewolf costume and is snarling and growling at me, and I just started singing Werewolves of London. I just started singing Werewolves of London to him, and he just went and ran off. And so I'm like, yeah, and so I'm that person that wants to volunteer, and Chris and Allison talked me out of volunteering for the one that they're talking about.
We had been there before.
Yeah, they had been there before, and so they had seen what they actually put people through, and they were like, nah, you don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, this is a little bit too much.
It's like, that's not really being scared, though. That's just being tortured.
Tortured,
like,
pretty much. Yeah,
different.
just
I mean,
being in the cold and the mud and getting stuff like flung at you and getting yelled at and all that. And after we had done our trail and was walking back around the little city that they have set up, I ran into a girl that had been part of our group, but she had been carted off because she was wearing that color bracelet or whatever. And
to be clear, we didn't know her.
We didn't know her,
with
yeah.
our group.
And I saw her, and I saw her in the bathroom, and she was just trying to get all these clumps of dirt and stuff like out of her hair, and like frantically like washing her face, and she was shivering and stuff. And I looked at her and I said, and I looked at her and I said, I hope it wasn't actually as bad as it looks like it was. And she was like, it was. And she's like, I would never do this again. So yeah, I think you, and that's the thing too, is like, do we really want to be scared? Like, we're always chasing that high.
Yeah, until
we're always
you end up in a hostage situation and you get Stockholm
I want to be
syndrome.
scared, but then it's like, when you're actually put into certain situations, you're like, do I? Because we used to go out like kind of ghost hunting sort of thing. And I remember that one time we had been out, and you and my brother got out of the car because nothing really happened while we were out ghost hunting. But then they got out of the car and went into Wendy's, and I was like, I'm not getting anything. I'm just going to sit in the car. And then the light came on for no reason. And then I got out of the car and I came in and was waiting while they were getting their stuff, and they were like, I thought you were sitting in the car. And I was like, well, the car's haunted now, so
yeah.
I came in where there's people.
It was Fazoli's. And this is, so you and I were both associated with,
okay, yeah, Fazoli's, not Wendy's.
Yeah. You and I were both associated with two different local ghost hunting groups. You were in one, I was in a different one, and those were like attempts at being professional or whatever. The thing you and I and your brother were doing were just going around to like weird abandoned
we
places.
didn't really have equipment. We'd maybe have a camera and a journal
take some
or
photos
something. Take
and
some photos, write some stuff down.
Yeah, and
that
like
was about as far as it went.
You were like, well, I know of this old graveyard. I know of this old house. Nobody lives here. Like somebody from my family lived there 20 years ago or whatever. Let's go see. And we would drive out in the middle of nowhere, and it'd be like, you know, pretty cool place, all grown up or whatever. And then and other like local places that are said to be haunted.
Egypt.
Little Egypt being one of them, which I have a sought after photo because photos of that are pretty hard to find apparently. And yeah, and then you came in and said like, we brought something with us that was weird. Who knows what you know,
well,
like
yeah,
the obvious
and me and my fiance earlier this year were having some experiences that we can still to this day not explain.
I'm going to ask that you save some of those because we might get back to those.
I have a couple,
Christmas.
and I was going to say, like, my grandma had a great ghost story, but I'm going to save it. But yeah, we had some of those, like, we had some experiences earlier this year, and we gave a name to whatever it is. We call it Bruce.
Fitting.
And we're like, well, you know, we find something broken or something. Well, Bruce did it or something. But here lately, it's almost like it's stopped. It's like whatever it was, it's not really doing much these days. So we don't know if Bruce vacated or if he's just waiting. Maybe he's going to wait for Halloween to like scare us. But we also, Ben and I just last week went what we call glamping, because it's not really camping. It's on his family's like property. So we were about maybe 200 feet from the main house or something. So it's like, hey, if we need to go inside and go stay in a house, we can. But when you're out there in a tent in total darkness in the middle of the night and you hear things.
Now, just to say, it's not in the city. Like this is
this is up in Estill County, up in the valley, and his parents live about 13 miles off the main road.
Yeah.
Off a main road, like back on a gravel trail. You got to cross creeks and stuff to get to it.
So when you're saying total, a lot of people think total darkness of like city lights.
No, there's none of that. It's moonlight.
Yeah.
It's moonlight, if that. And if it's cloudy, it's not even that. And you'll, and I'm that person that's like, I love to be scared. I love it. I live for it. And then you're laying there at 2:00 in the morning and there's some owls or something being like, whoo, or a dog howling off in the distance or something. And your imagination is...
Where is... That's not a dog. That's a coyote or something.
Yeah, that's true too. And you're laying there and you're like... And last week, I had the experience of like waking up and I could swear. I don't know if it was my subconscious, my imagination or what, but... I just woke up and I was looking around like, okay, yeah, remembering, I'm in the tent, whatever. And I could swear that I heard a voice like right outside the tent be like, hey, and I laid there and we had the dog, we had Shay in the tent with us, and I looked and Shay was just chill, and I'm like, well, if there was something out there walking around, Shay would be alert, and Ben was just laying there sleeping, and I was like, okay, it was probably just my imagination. But your imagination will get carried away with you when you're put into those actual situations where you think you hear something or see something or something's not quite right. And I've had those experiences where I have seen something or experienced something. I'll save some of those and you think, oh, I'm going to be all cool with it. But then when it actually happens, you're like, your adrenaline starts racing and you're trying to make sense of it, and you get spooked, And so that's why, to me, there's a difference. It's like we're chasing that when we're in a theater. Wes Craven talked about that people go to horror movies because you get the adrenaline rush a little bit, and you get to kind of live vicariously through live or die vicariously through the characters, but you know you're not in any real danger. You know you're going to kick in at some point and be like, I'm watching a movie, and you're going to be like, that's not real. And same thing when you go to a haunted house. You know, like, oh, this is a person in a costume. This is some fake blood. This is whatever it is. But when you're in those real life situations where you go to a real haunted location or a real place that has a weird ambiance or something, or you're sometimes even people that are playing around with Random Nautica or those apps now where you can ask a spirit to communicate with you through the app or something. And they'll just be playing around with it and they actually get really scared.
Yeah.
You know, or playing around with a Ouija board or playing around with whatever, like the little haunted games, or like, is there a spirit in the house? Or, you know, and people will really scare themselves, because when we truly encounter something that we can't explain or rationalize, that's when we get that high. We don't really get it from the stuff that's supposed to be scary, like the attempts to scare people most of the time. There's very few horror movies or haunted houses or anything that manage to get a rise out of me at all. But then if I'm in an unfamiliar setting or a place that you know has a weird history or something, and you have that experience that you can't quite wrap your mind around, it's going to stay with you, and it's going to give you the shivers or the heebie-jeebies or whatever. And that's the difference.
This just came to me. There's a place, I think they still have this particular one in Lexington, and I can't remember the name of it either, because it's not the Jacobson Park one, but it might have been what it became. And there's a portion of this, it's pretty big, you know, you go through and they lead you through or whatever, but you go into this one part and it's just this small, you know, sheet metal building, but it is jet black. There's like very little light. You can't really see anything in front of you, and it's also filled with fog, like the fake fog, and it's probably just wide open. Like, there's probably not much of a maze to it, and you just have to kind of follow along the wall, because if you get turned around any at all, you're done. Like, you're just in circles, because we were doing that for a bit. And finally, I just closed my eyes and put my hand on the wall and, like, grabbed Allison's hand, and she grabbed the person who was behind hers hand, and then we just, I felt my way through, but I was like, that's unnecessary. Like, because you can't breathe. It's like nothing but that fog, that fake fog, and you just can't breathe in there. And I was starting to panic, because I was like, we were so far in, I couldn't go back out just to go back out and catch my breath and then attempt it again. We were just stuck in the middle. There was no, it was either get out or be stuck for a while. So anyway, I did just want to say, for some reason, you talking about being in the thing and there being somebody out there made me also think that we haven't really talked about like pranks. And this seems to be an acceptable time of the year, other than like April 1st.
Trick or treat.
Yeah, like to play a prank on somebody or around a little more than usual, which is, if anything happens, I know I've gotten too predictable. Everyone just assumes it's me. And that sucks, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes somebody gets like an idea in their head and they're like, I could do this and get away with it because everybody will just think it's Chris. And it's fine. Well, it's not fine. I like to take credit for what I do. I just want it to be a mystery for a short time. Anyway, plan a night. I was just thinking about actually, like, I used to be the kind of person who would wait for somebody 20 minutes like behind a tree and just like take shallow breaths until they passed, and then and all it is a jump scare. That's all I did was that. And I just think like I would plan out like just as soon as you guys go, you know I don't know where his parents live, except I would follow you like half a mile behind, and then just walk that 13 miles off the road, and then all for like a few minutes of like shaking that tent, listening to some screams. I'm like, what's going on? So anyway.
Yeah, and what was odd about that experience of thinking that I heard somebody say, like, just outside the tent, is that earlier this year, when we were having some of our paranormal experiences, the only one that I'm going to mention because it ties into that is I was there by myself one day in the living room, and in the corner of the room, as clear as day, I heard a voice say, "Hey, miss." And I heard it so distinctly and so clearly, and it unnerved me so badly that I called my friend Austin and was like, dude, I just heard somebody. Like, I just heard a voice, and there should not have been a voice like talking to me just now. And so when it said, "Hey, miss," that's what it said. And then being out in the woods, and the word that I thought I heard at 2:00 in the morning is, So now I'm like, hey, maybe Bruce did follow us. That seems to be like how he likes to talk to us, is like, hey, or hey, miss. So that's weird, just saying.
It's totally not me. I just want to say.
Maybe Christoph. He is a magician, so maybe he sets these tricks up to make something fall hours later.
Those things I do are real. I really learned that, and that's a real thing.
He's a real
Every
sorcerer.
magician will tell you that's real.
All right. Well, now we have identified that Bruce is really Chris.
It's not me.
Mystery solved, not an unsolved mystery anymore. Gave yourself away.
I want to carve some pumpkins this year. I want to do a pumpkin carving that is, Allison's wanting to throw a party, like a Halloween party. And anybody who, you guys will both be there. Anybody who doesn't dress up, it's fine. You will be assigned a conceptual costume at the door, which will most likely be chosen not at random, but at my whim.
But yeah, something very...
or just like
demeaning.
dread.
And
schizophrenia.
That would be, I look forward to that kind of stuff. I look forward to that. That's part of the appeal for me, is like any of those old traditions, just getting people together, having a bonfire, carving some pumpkin, trying to scare each other. And I remember when you had that pumpkin carving thing that one year, and I think we watched some old, like I had Once Upon a Midnight Dreary or something that was like a little collection of spooky stories. Vincent Price narrated it and stuff. And I think we put that on, and I can't remember a couple of other things that you put on in the background, and we carved some pumpkins and stuff, and I don't remember what because we were doing the punch out things like the kits, and I don't remember what mine was supposed to be, but it turned into a snake, like a snake's head, and I was like, well, Slytherin, so it manifested, ended up looking like a snake
also
head.
If you have a juicer, do not underestimate like just throwing together some homemade apple cider with some pulp in it. It's, if you think you've had apple cider because you got it at the store, or you got some like packets like hot chocolate, you haven't. Like just
weak sauce.
Get some Macintosh apples or some Jonathan apples, juice them a bunch, put it up on the stove and put in some clove and cinnamon and maybe even some other like, a splash of some sort of citric juice to give it some bite, and let it simmer for quite a while and serve that out while you're doing something just either around the house or have some friends over for, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be a pumpkin carving or anything. Like, we have a garage now, so I just relish the idea of when the evenings are cooler, which I think is just on the horizon, sitting out there in the open air and just hanging out with some friends. It doesn't have to be. I think that is the real, like, Christmas feels forced and Halloween feels much freer. It's time to catch up with people. Things are about to not be calm anymore because of Christmas. It's like, it's the hectic season. Everybody knows it as that now. It's a stressful time of year for one reason or another. And I think it's a time we can just take to slow down, indulge in some sweets, candies or cakes or what have you. And if you absolutely can't do that, something savory.
I think that's a good point, because at Christmas you're expected to cook or have some dinner and like be happy, give gifts. Halloween,
make merry.
You just chill out.
Yeah, and also going back to the Samhain traditions and stuff, it's Witch's New Year. If you're of any pagan persuasion or whatever, Halloween is your New Year, and I always like to, around Halloween or on Halloween night, I will do a divination with only the major arcana of the tarot, and I will have everyone that is there pick a card, and that is their card for that year.
The following
it will be
year.
the upcoming year. You're on the precipice of the Witch's New Year, and so whatever card you get is sort of going to be the theme of that upcoming year. And I have seen it be so predictive. I've seen 2 people get the Chariot and then either move or go to school or something in a different location. And the Chariot is all about a journey, travel, expansion, whatever. I've seen people get the Death card, and then the next year is just full of transformation in their lives. It's like their life is dying and being reborn. And so I always think that's an interesting little tradition to do too, is to look at it as a new year, and to kind of like look ahead.
And just let it be fun. It doesn't have to be, like forced joy with people that you don't want to spend time with. It can be just like, and I'm talking about the other holiday. I really don't want to be, I sound like I hate Christmas. I only hate Christmas in comparison to Halloween because it's got the little, that sideways V gobbles up Halloween in comparison to Christmas and any other actual holiday. I feel, and like Christmas isn't just one day. It takes up 2 months out of the year now. It used to be like a good 3 weeks or whatever, like the 12 days. Then it was more like 3 weeks. Now it's all of December. And now it really feels like, I hear a lot of people complain about like, I guess we don't get nothing for Thanksgiving. Like, yeah,
it's just like
you get the day off.
Christmas part 1.
Yeah, it really does, because it's just like eating, I guess. I don't know. Like, and
as Garfield said, it's the day that humans celebrate having food by trying to eat every pumpkin, turkey, and whatever else he said, cranberry on the face of the earth.
Yeah. And that seems to be what that is, except we've already, a lot of places will start putting out legit Christmas stuff any day now, except Michael's. Michael's probably will too, but they holding strong, being Halloween headquarters for normal people. So yeah, just in comparison to that, because a lot of it feels forced. A lot of it feels like by the time you get to the actual day, you're pretty burnt out on a lot of the stuff. And I just want a day of actual rest from all the bullshit that I've had to deal with for the past 6 months. And Halloween feels more fun. And I think that if you lost sight of that, if you think it's something evil, just let it be fun. Let it be your version of whatever fun is. And one of the things,
dress up, eat some candy, listen to some cool Monster Mash or something.
Yeah, I want to hear the actual Monster Mash because we still haven't. It's like tribute. Anyway, I'm not explaining any of that. You mentioned something at the top of this, and Becky made me appreciate a certain level of this that I never really stopped to smell the roses for, because you would want to go out and really look at other people's stuff and not just be there for yourself, for the candy. It's like you wanted to go out to places, real places, not just like in a darkened neighborhood, like where they give out full bars, which you got to find that one neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? But go to the malls where people are congregating and you get to see what people came up with. Either they made their own thing or the kids are wearing, like see what everybody's doing this year and see how people are having fun, see what different cultures do and how different cultures, what they appreciate on Halloween. I don't want to get too into it, but it's not, white people do not appreciate Halloween. Let me tell you that right now. Other cultures get into it in a way that I don't fully understand because I'm not from that perspective. And it's not something that comes up a lot. Me and Devontae generally don't. So like, how do you kick it on Halloween? Why is that important to your culture? He'd probably look at me like I was like, my mom was white. What are you talking about? Anyway, Devontae, if you're listening, what's up?
But yeah, that's a good point too. And I always love to, and even with like at Scarefest, when people dress up for that, I love to see the concepts that people come up with. And when you're out in a crowd, if you're just out in a crowd on Halloween day or just going to do things, I love to go do normal things on Halloween and see who dresses up and who doesn't, and see who came up with made their own costume, threw something together, went to the thrift store, threw something together, and who bought the most basic costume off of a rack, and kind of just see how creative people get, or who does this person, it's almost like an alter ego or something. Like, do they go for something fun? Do they go for something scary? And it's
or
a little
the other,
glimpse.
or sexy. There's
sexy, yeah. There's a
big
whole
thing. Like, there's some people out there that they're repressed year round, and then on Halloween they zip down to the middle of the chest and let loose.
They're sexy Chucky or sexy.
Was it on Mean Girls?
Freddy
It's like
or
a mouse, duh.
Right? Yeah. And there's always that one kid that's like 3 or 4 days before Halloween, you can see him walking down Main Street. He's wearing his Freddy glove and his Freddy sweater, and they're like 8 or 9, and I'm like, what are you doing out by yourself? But you know what? You're the scariest thing out here, so I'm not with you. But yeah, I remember a couple years ago, me and my girlfriend, this is how into it I am. And everybody at my job knows this, especially my boss. I don't even need to put in a request off form anymore. I have multiple weeks of vacation built up. I always take my last week of vacation for the year before Christmas season starts, the last week of October. Sometimes it spills into whatever makes the full week, if it spills into the first few days of November. But I always take it through Halloween, so I do not have Halloween at work. I've never dressed up at work because I'm never there. And people ask me about that, but I'm like, no, I would work on Christmas Day. We're not open, but if they ask me to, would, because just give me whatever other day off that week and I'd actually get some rest than I would if I don't work on Christmas Day and have to do things for other people. But we were in Columbus, Ohio, and we just happened to be at this mall, and we were about to leave. And a lot of malls, I guess all over America, depending on what day Halloween falls on, they will have their celebration or their trick-or-treating or some sort of event not on actual Halloween, because this wasn't Halloween Day. And we were about to leave and make our way back home, and then we realized this mall is having their Halloween event. So went up to like the second floor, and just there was also an animal thing. I don't know why they had like bats and owls and some other lizards. It was like a Humane Society thing that was in conjunction with this. I don't know why. But just sitting there and taking the time to just fold your arms on the rail and look at everybody's costume. And don't discount those people who got something quick or something cheap, because they at least put forth the effort to do something.
Had to pick something out and decide to put it on and decide to participate. And that's great.
Yeah, like anything at all. And the more creative, the better. We live in a real cosplay culture now. That's been a big thing for close to 20 years, and it's only getting better. People are getting more and more creative with that, more and more crafty, and by putting together like sometimes better than Hollywood standards costumes.
That's why it's hard for me to look at like Halloween stuff anymore, because anytime I go through the costumes, I'm like, I can make that better.
Yeah, some of them are pushing for just like more like real clothes, or like a goth section that's like, we could just shop here.
I could wear that year round.
Yeah.
And probably do.
Spirit has been like, there's a few other sections where it's, slightly higher quality things, or like real clothes quality stuff, and that's pretty cool. Some of like the costume stuff, it's like, look at this Doctor Who onesie. I don't know, that's not a real thing, but I imagine it is somewhere, like that brown suit and like the trench coat all is one piece that zips up in the back. I could see you in that. I'm gonna find that. So anything else?
Yeah, a big one we missed is the Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors.
I thought of it when we mentioned it.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention it, but yeah, that is a huge one. I feel like almost following in the footsteps of what we talked about, all the TV shows, and Charlie Brown was a big one for me. That would one of those ones that would play every year. There's so few things that
and the Garfield
one, yes.
Halloween.
Garfield
episode.
had 3 big specials that you can find. I don't know if you can find it on DVD anymore, but he did not in this order, but Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And then when The Simpsons started their Treehouse of Horror, crazy. Some of those were like an extremely Twilight Zone, some of them based on Twilight Zone episodes. It was extremely influenced by that, but non-canonical, whatever canonicity matters for The Simpsons, it doesn't. But one of my favorite things, I've always wished they would put out just a collection of those, which you can go through maybe even Disney separates them out now and makes a playlist of just those episodes. I think that would be great to like, I've seen, I actually, this is embarrassing, I forgot to watch it last year. So this year, I'm going to have 2 new ones, if I assume they are going to do it. And I don't think that they did one the first year, that like for season 1. So whatever Treehouse of Horror number, it's like -1 from whatever season they're on, because the first season was a half season.
Yeah, and the first season kind of started in December.
Yeah,
too.
it was. I think one of their first episodes, if not the first episode, is a Christmas episode, right?
That's where they get Santa's Little Helper.
Yeah.
And then the proper season. Yeah, I am closely tied with The Simpsons. Their first episode was just like a couple weeks before I was born.
I remember watching the first episode too. And it was like cartoons at night. And I think we've probably mentioned this before, The Simpsons are a lot more wholesome than people give them credit. Like George Bush Sr. talked extremely disparagingly about The Simpsons without ever having watched it. It was just a slice of real life. Like, these are what people are, I'm being slightly facetious here, but this is what, kids
They're a relatable family.
Yeah, it really is on a lot of levels that people can get. And then they go to extremes sometimes to make us laugh, but like this is something I think all three of us grew up with, and as adults appreciated on a entirely different level going back and rewatching them. The debate about when it got bad, when things dropped, the dips and valleys and peaks as years have gone on, because we're cutting on 30 years now?
30, almost 35.
Damn. But I'll drop in on one sometimes and I'm like, I don't think that it's necessary. Obviously, it's up and down in value, but I think a lot of it sometimes is simply just the cultural relevance and the writers writing for themselves, and not everybody. Like, sometimes when you watch something and you're like, did they make this specifically just for me? Because I love this and everyone else seems to hate it. And that's my specific shout out to David Lynch for the day.
Well, there's also the whole spooky controversy that there's so many predictive things in The Simpsons.
Yes.
Yeah. So
except
it's kind of like
we have to
their
debunk
own...
that went viral is the Donald Trump one. The Donald Trump one going down the elevator. People, like, somebody erroneously put the date on that one wrong. It was like, oh my God. They knew what they were doing. They were with us, because that one didn't happen. That one was afterward. It was real, but it was after the real event. They just parodied that real event. Having said that, there are a bunch of other things that are really weird that were like, and 10, they have their 20 years
even
back.
with like the Halloween episodes, they have their finger on the pulse of like what is going on in the genre. It's almost like how Scream would have commentary. From one Scream to another, it would be based on what is going on in the horror genre right now. Because in Scream 4, they made fun of like torture porn. All the tropes were about torture porn and stuff. And then by the time we got to
Saw and Hostel in the
Scream 2020 or whatever, the sort of requel, as you would call it, they referenced elevated horror and how slashers and stuff are out. And it's all about elevate. And the Simpsons were so good at like having their pulse on like, well, what are people watching right now? What? And they would find a way to interpret that in the Simpsons verse and do something slightly different, but just their own spin on it. And I always thought that was so clever and so creative. And so those are one of the best things to go to.
Yeah, they always stand the test of time.
To have fun with it. And there are certain ones that stand out to me. The Dracula one, when Mr. Burns was Dracula.
Yeah.
That one stands out to me. The one where
Precious blood.
Bart had a twin.
Yes.
And when Bart had the twin that was in the attic and stuff.
And spoiler alert for this 57-year-old cartoon. Bart was the evil one, and they got him switched.
Yeah, the good one was good one was locked in the attic, and Bart was the evil twin that they had let loose the whole time. And then he's kind of like, "How did you not catch on? I mean, like, for real? Well, that's how dumb you are, Homer."
We could do an episode of just talking about the Simpsons Halloween episodes, once I get caught up. But yeah, that's something that I always like to have on in the background, and something more recent that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because my girlfriend's slightly obsessed with this little weird Americana thing. I'm not sure the release date for this, but I slept on it for a long time. We watched it a couple years back, and it really, I can understand all the enthusiasm about it, because I kept hearing about it. Was Over the Garden Wall, and it's not
Still not familiar with it, but you guys are going to introduce me, so.
And if you haven't watched it, it's like a miniseries. It's like a cartoon miniseries. So I always assumed it was like another really long-running thing. I don't know why. I just, because so rarely does something like this come along. It's one story. So, like, unlike Adventure Time, which I love Adventure Time, but there's a lot of filler in there that has nothing to do with the core plot. There might be some side quests and things that are going on, but it's all about the journey. And there are so many it's so weird and up. There's like so many theories about this, like, were they dead the whole time? Was he did he have a near-death experience? Or, this isn't to spoil anything, just watch it through like whatever kind of lens you want to, but it's not very long. I can't remember how many episodes it is, but I think they're only like 20-minute episodes. I want to say it's like 7 or 8.
It's no more than 10, if that.
Yeah, around that maybe. Something definitely that you could just have on in the background while you're doing other stuff, or sit it and actually watch it. I think that The Simpsons is a great thing to have on in the background, especially the Halloween episodes, or for just any time of around the year. That is like comfort food to me. I was trying to put together earlier in this year. This is just a personal thing to me. I think we should just touch on music, and if there's anything else, obviously The Simpsons was a big one, because especially for the three of us, I feel like. Earlier this year, I was writing a magic show, Mentalism and Magic, and I wanted music to be a huge part of it. So I was putting together a list of songs from all of history and modern pop culture as well that had a very specific theme, and that would be, is it kind of funny, but meant to be extremely dark, like a little too dark,
black comedy kind of,
and I would break it wasn't like a hard and fast rule like it has to be like a Weird Al horror song, because I got introduced through a friend of mine I met where I'd been performing to Tom, forgot his name, but he would do these songs called, one of them was Poisoning Pigeons in the Park. Okay. I'm going to find this really quick. So anyway, I started putting together this list, and one of them, I would break my rule a little bit and have I'm Only Happy When It Rains on there, because it feels like an autumn song, a dark season song. And anyway, I have this playlist of songs that, like Paint It Black and other things of that ilk. There's a lot of, like Ghost. It's like, it's fun, but it's also dark. And so if anybody has anything like that I am as of yet unaware of, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, because there's no way that I found everything. I'd love to mention a few more of these songs, but I can't find the playlist because they changed YouTube and it's harder to find your things. Edit this down hardcore, but I swear to God, give me just a second.
Well, yeah, and I make a playlist pretty much every I make a playlist usually for my birthday, and then of like things from that I'm listening to around that time of year, kind of like my theme songs or whatever, things that I really enjoy. But I always do one to have on during Halloween or something too. I'll do a trick and treat playlist, and I'll just put all kinds of music that sort of fits that fun but spooky kind of ambiance or atmosphere. And I'll have like horror themes, from things like the Tubular Bells and the Halloween, and even the old like the Munsters theme song, stuff like that'll be on there. And then modern, more modern songs. There's usually some Ghosts, there's some Stevie Nicks, there's the White Stripes have some great songs for this time of year, like Black Bat Licorice, Walking with a Ghost,
which is a cover.
And
Tegan and Sarah, although White Stripes obviously do it better.
Yeah, and so it's always fun to put together those little playlists,
especially
like you're talking about.
Newer bands like Ice Nine Kills.
Yes,
their last couple albums.
I just discovered them last year, and they're very immersive because their videos and stuff are like little horror movies and things.
Okay, so I did find it. There's a bunch of crazy songs on here that they caught the devil and put him in jail in Eudora, Arkansas. Like, if you look up this, it's a crazy country song. The newest one that I found was by this woman named Madeline, and it's just called Dead. Look this up. I love this song. Blood Red Shoes. There's an old band from the 60s that I'd never heard of when I was doing research on this, trying to find songs that would fit into this, called the Toll Puddle Martyrs. Time Will Come. That's a really good dark one. Supergrass have a song called Mary. Obviously, Screamin' Jay Hawkins. If anybody's listening, they were screaming Jay Hawkins at me. And Tom Lear was the guy. Poisoning Pigeons in the Park. He was kind of the Weird Al of his day. He was a bit of a crooner, but like these songs are ridiculous that he does, and they're pretty funny. Florence and the Machine. She has a song called My Boy Builds Coffins. Need I Say More? Cab Calloway, obviously. Karen Elson, when she made her first album with Jack White, she had the whole album. Put that whole album on. It's so good for just after the air gets crisp, just after the temperature drops down into like the 70s, 60s. Karen Elson, The Truth Is in the Dirt on the Ground.
Birds, Circle in the Sky.
Yeah, the whole album's great. David Bowie's last whole album, Black Star. A lot of Tom Waits, Right Bullets, Drop of Poison, Modest Mouse, Satin in a Coffin, The Doors, People Are Strange, Scott Walker, anything from Scott Walker is up. And the theme song that they chose for
What We Do in the Shadows.
What We Do in the Shadows, You're Dead, is the number one song on that list. So anyway, I just wanted to mention a little bit of music.
Shout out to Red Right Hand too.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Gotta listen
That's
to
been
that.
maybe overused in media, but for obvious reasons. Because it's, I mean, so many movies, the X-Files. I don't know what the first one was. Scream was one of the first big ones, but that was an 80s
in
song,
all
wasn't it?
but one of the Scream franchise films. They've had it in every movie except for one.
And it's Nick Cave?
Yes.
Okay,
Like,
so
Not to be confused with Nick Cage, long legs, but
not directly horror, but a lot of metal in general.
yeah.
Especially like gothic metal, like the ambiance and like attire is just
Yeah.
dark but beautiful.
yeah,
Voltaire.
Ghost is the obvious example. Sleep Token's another one. In This Moment has really, really dark, like, costume themes. They have a song called The Big Bad Wolf, and when I saw them perform live, the lead singer is doing her thing, and the backup dancers are wearing these wolf costumes and chasing her around on stage and snarling and have chains on them and stuff, and they're very... and then I think... what is that band? I'm drawing a blank now. Motionless in White.
Yes.
Motionless in White have a werewolf song, and they have a lot of stuff that really fits that ambiance, and
Yeah,
they look very...
You mentioned Warren Zevon earlier. He was one that I didn't use, but I just felt like it'd also been overused. But that's also, he has some really great songs.
Don't
really
forget
great
Boris
songs.
the Spider.
And yes, from The Who. So weird. That one's really weird. But yeah, this time of year, it's the time of year where it's okay for normies to listen to metal because it's like the cool music. Totally fine. Whatever gets you in the door. Listen to cool music.
You may end up staying. Who
Yeah,
knows?
and also I think we'd be remiss not to mention our resident original soundtrack composer, Danny Elfman, who composed the theme for The Simpsons. People think of him as like, oh, doesn't he do all the spooky circus music for
Tim Burton.
the Tim Burton guy? Yeah, well, he also did the first Hulk movie. Look up his
Like his actual music.
yeah, like
Oingo Boingo.
look it up because he's done a lot of experimental things. It's not just Tim Burton type music. That's just what he's capable of because he comes from Oingo Boingo. But he's also put out I want to say rock album, like it's pretty prog rock, but it's also got some metal elements in there that he released just right around the time of the pandemic. And yeah, and that's also just things like old Broadway shows like Sweeney Todd. Like any version of Sweeney Todd is something that if you know the music, it's something you could put on while you're having fun. I think that's what your wife Sarah and Allison listen
Bald
to.
Mountain from Fantasia.
Yeah, a lot of Fantasia, but also In the Hall, the Mountain King, Bald Mountain, the Witches I can't think of it. And if anybody is listening to this, they're like screaming at me, "Get your phone out again! You had it just a second ago." Well, we're at the end of the episode, and I'm tired. I'm sorry. It's like
Do your own research.
Which is
You can Google it. Google it yourself if you're
Not
yelling
which is
at us.
mass. I can't remember. Anyway, there's a lot of great music out there to put on in the background. It doesn't have to be just a show or a movie. If you feel like, oh, we'll all get bogged down in just watching the show, or I don't want to walk in on it and not know what's going on. I want to actually sit because you really should sit and just watch a lot of this stuff, like the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. You should take some time and actually see if they're good and funny and dark at the same time. But also, what was the other one I said? The one that I brought up, Over the Garden Wall. That one is well worth watching. And any of those other things you mentioned, like the Goosebumps and any old Twilight Zones, I'm sure there's a playlist if you can find where I think it's owned by CBS, but there's probably a playlist of the best ones for Halloween because you wouldn't want to accidentally put on the Christmas one.
And we mentioned Twilight Zone, so I think it's worth mentioning Tales from the Dark Side as well. That was another one that I probably remember more than Twilight Zone, actually.
Yeah, there's a huge culture around that too.
Or, go another one that's really great in that kind of vernacular is the Creepshow stuff from Stephen King.
Yeah.
Stephen King and George Romero did some stuff in Creepshow, and those are little short things that you can watch that really fit the ambiance of the season as well. So there's you got a lot of options, people. You have a lot of options to get you into the spooky mood and the spooky season.
Now, if Alex listens to this one, She's going to want you to put on every single one of those songs and watch every single one of these movies and cartoons that we've mentioned.
Yeah, she's that age now where her favorite movie is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. That one's PG-13, so that one's good. But she'll ask us about certain things, and we're like, not yet. Not yet. We'll give her... And she knows who... she'll put on the Ghostface mask. Mm-hmm. And she knows Ghostface, and she knows Freddy, and she knows Jason, and all of those characters, but she hasn't really watched the movies yet. But she knows the basic gist of what they are.
Yeah, you got to know the kid. Like, you got to have a feel for the kid and know what they're in for. And then when it's like...
I grew up... My parents were religious and very conservative, so I'm surprised that they let me watch horror the way that they did, because neither one of them really likes horror very much. And my mom's rule was always like, well, you can watch this as long as it doesn't bother you. And so when I got scared by Children of the Corn, I had to kind of pull back from horror for a little bit. But I have clear memories. I had a friend, a neighbor friend, that would come over and watch the USA Groovy Movies with me when USA did those. And I remember, and my mom would always make us, little snacks and things. She'd make us some hot dogs or some peanut butter sandwiches or something, and she'd come in and be like, well, what are you guys watching this time or whatever? And we'd be sitting there, and I remember once it was one of the Friday the 13th movies, and it was one where Jason had the altar with his mom's head on it or whatever. and my mom's like, what are you watching? And I was like, well, that's Jason's mom's head or whatever. He keeps it, and she talks to him like his dead mom talks to him. And it's like,
it's a family movie.
Kill, die, kill for me, Jason. And all this. And my mom looked at me like, okay, but it didn't give me nightmares or whatever. So she's like, okay, that's fine, I guess. And I remember like being really little, and I'd be watching these B movies, and I would say, wake me up when they show the monster, when they show the big giant mantis or the big giant whatever. And if I fell asleep, I'd be like, I want to see the monster, and as long as it didn't bother me, they would let me watch it. And we always have these weird, because Alex told us recently she watched Jurassic Park. And it was kind of scary, but she knew that it's just a movie. And she also and she's very smart. She's 9 years old, but she's very, she's ahead of the game. And she mentioned, that she plays these horror themed video games, play like The Last of Us, Walking Dead, Poppy Playtime, which is more geared towards kids, but has some very dark elements in it. And she'll be like, well, my mom lets me play those because they're not real or whatever. And she's like, and I'm like, Mom, the movies aren't either. I know those are people dressed up, that's fake blood, so I think she's getting at that age where she's like, oh, Freddy's not real, I could watch that, it wouldn't scare me. So
think that till it's bedtime.
Well, that is true. Again, that's one of those situations where you never know. You're brave until you're not.
Yeah.
But I think kids generally are not as scared of that kind of stuff as adults think they are. And I think that's why kids love Halloween so much too. Is like they're like, okay, well now we can go crazy with it. We're allowed to do the spooky stuff.
Yeah.
Fun for them. And I think that's a good introduction to it. Is we have fun with our fears. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good for people to have fun with your fears.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, until you go too far, then you're the weird kid. But
yeah, but you know what?
Well, there's
that was
always
all
a bad
of us.
apple in every bunch. There's always a bad apple in every bunch.
Did we hit everything? I feel like other than doing a rundown of the history of Halloween, which we're not going to do, Becky.
Well, we did touch upon that. We did talk about where some of those traditions come from, but
I'm sure we could talk for hours, but I think we're at a good stop.
And I just want to say thank you guys for inviting me to be part of the conversation again. Obviously, this is what I live for. This is my personality year round.
Edit that part out.
About this kind of stuff is so fun. So thank you guys for letting me be part of the conversation.
Yeah, no problem. But if you made it with us this far, thank you. We're just kicking off spooky season. There's more to come. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch all of our episodes. Go back and watch our old ones. Be sure to follow us on our social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. We'll leave links below. And until next time, see ya.